Welcome back to the Hunt G4 channel. We're here with Jeff to talk optics. We have a lot of customers that come in and ask a ton of questions. Jeff is constantly answering. Me and Jeff got together, we talked about it. We wrote down about 5 of the top questions that we get asked, and so we're going to kind of go through those and have Jeff explain the question to us, so hopefully it'll help you guys have a better understanding maybe what you're looking for. The first question that gets asked a ton is from Western black-tailed Roosevelt hunters, and basically what is the best optic as far as from 10 by 8 by 42, 50, all that stuff to use in Western hunting black-tailed Roosevelt.
Everybody seems to gravitate towards a 10 car binocular, but for Western Oregon hunting, where you're not always looking great distance, you're in the timber, low light's key, you're looking close to medium range, looking for detail. In all honesty, a lot of times an 8 by 42 could come in handy over a 10. You're going to get a wider field of view with an 8. You're going to be brighter and low light with that 8 by 42 versus a 10 by 42, and you're going to hold it steadier. So you're not always looking 1,000 yards plus great distance. A lot of it's in the timber, maybe at 100 yards looking for detail or a little color difference or an ear. Again, an 8 where you have that wider field of view, you're going to pick that up. You're going to be brighter and real low light in the timber where you don't have a lot of light coming through. That's for an 8 by 42. Plus, for an archery hunter, where you're using one bow in one hand, optic in the other, or you're going to brace against your bow, having an 8, you can hold a little steadier, or you can even get down into a smaller binocular, where an 8 by 32 is going to be relatively the same brightness as a 10 by 42. Again, that 8 by 42 rather than a 10 can be helpful in that situation.
Perfect. The next question that gets asked a lot comes to more spotting scope, which a lot of guys are running now, packing in. There's obviously tons of sizes, shapes, but the biggest one is, we have an example here of an angled versus a straight, and that's a big question. A lot of people go both ways, but definitely it's asked a ton, which way to go, which is the best, angled, straight, for what deal. So Jeff, explain that one. You get asked a ton. So
yeah, that's popular. Whatever you're used to, I'd stick with that if you're comfortable. But the guys that are just getting into a spotting scope or switching, if you haven't used an angle, a little bit of learning curve where you're looking at an animal across a canyon a mile away through your binoculars and you try to find it in a spotter. It's easy with a straight, look right over it and find it, where an angle you're looking out and then time to look down and try to find it. So generally it's quicker and easier with a straight. The angle does have its advantages. You see a lot of that with birders and naturalists, probably a little more than the hunting market, where you've got people using a stand-up full-size tripod, because that tripod can be shorter, kept more stable, and if multiple people are using it in different heights, you can just bend over and look through that without having to raise or lower that tripod. If you've got that setting here, a taller person or shorter person, everybody can look through that, whereas a straight, you're going to have to raise or lower that tripod to see through that. But for hunting, generally you're sitting or kneeling, so it's just you using it. You're going to have it set at the height you want. Looking steep uphill, it's easier with an angle. Looking steep downhill, it can be easier with a straight. If you're using a window mount in a car, straight can be easier, although on a lot of angles you can turn that one way or the other. Still going to be easier with an angle. And then the biggest thing for hunting that I see is with an angled, if it's snowing or raining out in a hunting situation, you're going to be much more prone to get that moisture in the eyepiece unless you're constantly covering it. With a straight, you're sitting behind it, even if you're glassing with your binocs, that eyepiece is protected, and then it's just easier. You're not having to clean that off or cover it constantly. So it's one of the big advantages, I think, with a straight over an angled. But again, it's all personal preference, whatever you're used to, whatever fits the bill. And again, if you're using a full-size stand-up tripod more than you are sitting and kneeling, that's where an angle could come into play a little more.
I personally run both. I have a larger spotting scope, a Swarovski, and like a 95 that Jeff had explained all this to me before, the differences. And I run the bigger one because the bigger one to me is one you're going to be using a lot, putting a lot of time behind it. I got the mini, like this version here, in an angle for a packable style, just because I feel like for me, on a shorter tripod, I'm packing it in. Although there's benefits to the straight, I just think from the small version, I think, because it's just going to be like a setup for a while, you use it, put it away. I'm not going to be sitting behind that thing for hours, right? So I run both, so that's kind of I guess another way to look at it. On my smaller packable one that's going in, I'm running angled. On the bigger one where I'd be spending a lot of time behind it, the straight seems to be better. So anyway, that kind of covers that. The next one, which is another one we get asked a lot, comes down to objective. And a lot of people feel like with a larger objective, they get a larger field of view, which I think is obviously not necessarily the case. So Jeff, you can explain that.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily come into play, the size of the objective. The size of the objective, a bigger objective versus a smaller objective, the big thing there is light gathering. So it's letting more light in. Not that it's gathering more light, but it's letting more light in. So it's going to be brighter. You've got a larger exit pupil. If you have a 10 by 42 versus a 10 by 50, that 50 millimeter being that larger front objective is letting more light in, so it will be brighter in low light than a smaller objective. Trade-off's also power. You're dividing power into that objective, but the objective is not playing into your field of view. It's how much light you're letting in. So larger objective, generally more light, brighter in low light.
Perfect. The next one, which is fourth question, jumping into rifles and rifle scopes. 30 millimeter obviously is a pretty common one today. 1 inch has been around forever. Both are used. So a lot of people are asking, what's the difference between a 1 inch scope and a 30 millimeter scope?
The biggest thing on a 1 inch versus a 30 millimeter is that 30 millimeter, you've got that larger tube. 1 inch is around 26 millimeters. That larger tube allows for more internal adjustments. So for long range shooting, more elevation travel and more windage travel, but you're not necessarily always getting larger internal lenses that a lot of people think by buying a 30 millimeter. The biggest thing is you still have that, in lots of cases you have the same size erector tube, erector assembly inside, but it allows for more room of travel inside that larger tube. So for long range shooting, 30 millimeter, there's 34 millimeter, 35 millimeter scopes, and generally those larger tubes allow for more travel for long range shooting.
Perfect. The last question, which here in Oregon, spring bear draw results just came out. So this is a big one that clearly right now is coming up a lot, and a lot of people are talking about getting ready for spring bear hunting, especially eastern Oregon. Obviously big terrain, open desert, big country, pretty open. A lot of people are constantly trying to figure out and questioning what optic is the best optic to use in a spring bear situation where you're glassing a lot, glassing long range, big country.
That's going to be kind of the opposite of the first question on Blacktail and Roosevelt, Western Oregon. A lot of that Eastern Oregon is going to be open country, long distance, big canyons. That's back where a 10 is kind of the most popular, but going into 12s or 15s, especially off a tripod, play a big difference. Where you're going to sit for long periods of time, especially on those larger power glass. If you either mount them on a tripod, it's a world of difference for picking up detail long distance, or even just put them on a walking stick. So if you've got a walking stick, setting that on there to take out that hand movement, sitting behind it, it makes a big difference in glassing. So that higher power, when you're trying to look for bears at a mile away or a couple miles away in these big canyons or clear cuts, is that black thing a burnt stump? Is it a bear? Is that brown thing a rock over there? Is that a bear? That's where that high power magnification. Same with anything, but especially on spring bear in that open country, rather than lesser power. And then obviously spotting scope. So when you do see that, you're not sure, or you want to check the quality or the size of it, then a spotting scope to zoom in even more. But generally that's where at least 10s and especially 12s and 15s come into play. But you'll be far better off if you can steady those higher powers rather than just hand holding them.
Perfect. That's I guess the biggest questions we've been getting recently. Obviously spring bear. Hope you guys got a tag, and hopefully that'll help some of you guys pick the optics you guys are looking for. Answer some of your questions. I'm sure there's many more questions, which I'm sure we'll get to at another time. But for today, that's it. Appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully you'll tune in next time, and we'll cover some more optic stuff with Jeff at some point. So thank you.
Thank you.